Water culture and history in Montana. Water in Montana is a source of inspiration, power, and conflict. Our culture in Montana today, ranching, agriculture, recreation, spiritual, is tied to water and has been shaped by the past. Water in our state is managed through a complex system of federal, state, and local authorities. If we didn't manage our water, our drinking water would be at risk of contamination from various forms of pollution. Our crops would be more susceptible to drought, and water might not always be available for other uses such as aquatic life and recreation. We tend to think about our water in terms of quality and quantity. Both are important. Water quantity. Early explorers noticed that water was not as abundant in the West as it was in the East. In the late 1800s, John Wesley Powell was concerned that the scarcity of water could lead to conflict as Euro-American settlers expanded westward. Powell proposed policies for development of the arid West that promoted conservation and low-density, open grazing over the majority of the landscape. Congress rejected his policy proposals and encouraged farming instead. They based their decision on a popular climatological theory of the day, that rain follows the plow. It turned out that the plow location did not influence precipitation, and many of the Euro-American settlers that moved west suffered extreme hardships. The framers of Montana's Constitution wrote that all surface, underground, flood, and atmospheric waters within the boundaries of the state are the property of the state for the use of its people and are subject to appropriation for beneficial uses as provided by law. So that there is enough water for all water users, the amount of water withdrawn from a water body is regulated by water rights. Here in Montana, the right to use water is considered a property right, similar to a surface right or a mineral right. A water right can be sold, regulated, subjected to eminent domain, or taxed. However, water is different from other real property since the water can be reused. Unlike other rights, a water right may be forfeited if it is not used. Another difference from other property rights is the fact that a water right is limited by its beneficial use and the change of that use is subject to review by the DNRC. The concept that water does not belong to a single person, but rather is common to all, dates back to the Romans. Since the California Gold Rush, the prior appropriation doctrine has been the law in Montana and elsewhere in the arid West. A person's right to use the water depends on when that use first began. Whoever diverted the water first for a beneficial use and laid claim to it has priority over other water users. First in time is first in right, is the expression that is often used to summarize the doctrine of prior appropriation. Therefore, senior users have the right to fulfill their water right before junior users. For example, a water right holder that has a right with a date of 1890 for 1 cubic foot per second, CFS, may get more water in dry years than a water right holder with a right for 25 CFS with a date of 1940. This is very different from how water is managed in the East. Eastern states are governed by the riparian doctrine. Under the riparian doctrine, all landowners whose property is adjacent to a body of water have the right to make reasonable use of it. If there is not enough water to satisfy all users, allotments are generally fixed in proportion to frontage on the water source. These rights cannot be sold or transferred other than with the adjoining land, and water cannot be transferred out of the watershed. Therefore, landowners familiar with this system may be unaware of how differently water is managed in the West. Water can only be appropriated for a beneficial use. If one cannot use the water beneficially, one cannot exercise the right to use the water. And just because you own the land, it does not mean that you own the water on it necessarily. A water right can be sold separately from the land. Just like quantity, the protection of water quality in the United States has its roots in legislation dating back more than 150 years. When most of us think of legislation to protect water quality, we usually think of the more recent Federal Water Pollution Control Act of 1972, known as the Clean Water Act. The CWA was a response to increasing degradation of our streams, rivers, and lakes. No location or situation better exemplifies this than the Cuyahoga River in Ohio. The Cuyahoga flows through Cleveland and into Lake Erie. The river was used as a mode of transportation, but also as a method of disposal for waterfront industries. Oil, sludge, and other industrial waste floating on and in the river sometimes caught fire. This happened several times during the 20th century. The fire in 1969 was different in that our country was beginning to have a different attitude about the environment. In 1970, the Environmental Protection Agency was established, and in 1972, Congress passed the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, more commonly referred to as the Clean Water Act. The objective of the act is to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. The act does this by regulating the discharge of pollutants into water and regulates water quality standards for surface waters, such as streams, rivers, and lakes. This means that certain waters must meet a certain criteria or water quality standard. Montana Department of Environmental Quality groups beneficial uses into 3 broad categories. Recreation includes swimming, boating, and other water activities that involve physical contact with water. Aquatic life includes all the plants and animals that make up the aquatic ecosystem. Fish are part of this, but are listed as a separate beneficial use due to their recreational and economic importance. Water supply includes all domestic, municipal, industrial, and agricultural uses. Although drinking water falls under the beneficial use of water supply, the Safe Drinking Water Act, SDWA, was established in 1974 to protect the quality of drinking water in the U.S. This law focuses on all waters actually or potentially designed for drinking use, whether from above ground or underground sources. The goal of SDWA is to ensure that water is protected from source to tap. In general terms, the SDWA addresses drinking water, discharges to groundwater, and the water systems that deliver drinking water to the public. The CWA is the counterpart to the SWDA. It regulates wastewater discharges to surface water, supports the creation and rehabilitation of wastewater treatment plants, and protects surface water. Some overlap obviously exists between these 2 statutes. However, as a basic rule, the SDWA is concerned with public health associated with safe drinking water, while the CWA has a broader goal of clean, fishable, and swimmable waters. Both water quality and quantity are important to support the needs of Montanans. The Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, DNRC, periodically updates the state water plan to address many of these issues, especially those related to quantity. The state water plan provides information on Montana's water resources and offers recommendations to policymakers, water users, and the public for options to meet Montana's future water needs while protecting existing beneficial uses. 4 Basin Advisory Councils, BACs, were formed in the major watersheds with broad representation that included agriculture, conservation, elected officials, industry, municipal, recreation, and tribal representatives. Through the BAC's collective work and ideas, the state water plan was developed. Concise and highly readable, this document provides an overview of Montana's water resources and lays out a path for managing them over the next 20 years. More information can be found on the organization websites and the information pages listed. Check out the Water Resources and Agencies document. It is a PDF document posted on the same page as this learning module. This presentation was developed by the Montana Watercourse with funding from the Environmental Protection Agency.